this computer. So welcome everyone to our April 19th, 2022, April is ASC month meeting. Let's start off with, does anybody have any questions about anything that we've gone over to this point or any items that we have discussed to this point? Any questions whatsoever? Anything you need to bring up, go over, talk about that we've done? All right, well, let's go ahead and look at the schedule for today. Today's schedule, I'm going to give some introductions. And I'm actually, I did actually get a set of slides from Clint Abrams. Clint apologized. He had an emergency come up, could not be here today. Clint is going to be is the business development manager for Florida and Ohio right now. So he's got those two states. And so I'm going to go over a little bit about those two states in a set of PowerPoints that he sent me. Then I'm going to go into the Cisco Modeling Labs. After that, Chris Nordlinger from Splunk will be here, and he'll have a presentation to talk to you about. David Oliver is then going to run us through a series of, or talk to us a little bit about creating custom pods. And I sent out from David earlier today via MailChimp a series of PowerPoints that he's going to be using today in his presentation. So he'll be able to go over and talk a little bit about how they're using custom pods. And that's actually going to be good because it's going to kind of tie in with my discussion of the Cisco Modeling Labs and what I'm going to do for that. And I'm getting a phone call here. Hold on one second, everyone. I'm going to mute myself and stop my phone from ringing. Well, if I can get this to come over here. Oh, I know what's happening. All right, it stopped. All right. And then we'll have finally some questions, some time for questions at the end, Q&A, that we can go back and talk about anything that you need to discuss. And if I can make this somewhat work, there you go. All right. So first things first, I want to do is I want to talk just a little bit about.
Kelly.
Yes, sir.
There's a question in the chat from Kirby.
Okay, about the, Kirby?
Asking now, are you planning a security ITQ course?
Excellent question. Okay, now here is what I need to know, folks. We do not currently teach the network security in our instructor training center because honestly, there's no certification that maps to it. And so we didn't know if anybody would be using it. However, there's been some requests inside of Kirby's ENSA and out in the wild to run a network security ITQ course this summer because Kirby, unless I'm mistaken, network security does require ITC training.
That's correct.
Check that to make sure. By the way, if you ever needed to know whether or not a class needed training in order to be used at your school, you simply go to course resources, you click on that course, and you scroll down and we'll see that instructors, you do have to take a class at Instructor Training Center. So if you want to take, or if you have someone who would like to take the network security class, please email me and we will try our best to run it this summer. Okay. We now have at least 2 ITQ network security folks that are on staff, Kirby and myself. And so if you are interested, please let me know. And if I can get 10 people on the list to take it, I will run it through our ITC this summer. And then that could possibly, if it's something we see people really want, it'll be something we'll try to start offering each time we do our training. So very good question. Thanks for reminding me, Kirby. So make sure if you're interested in taking a network security ITC class, which is required in order to teach this course, then please send me an email and let me know, because if I can get 10 people on the list, I will run that course through our ITC. So, okay. And I'll be showing you something in just a little bit, how we'll probably be doing the labs for this network security class. We'll probably be using CML to do it. So let's talk just a few minutes about Florida and Ohio. And so again, I'm filling in for Clint because Clint had an emergency. It was a family emergency he had to go to. So I hope everything works out there. Here is the USA and Canada overall. So again, we're going to kind of skip this. This is the one we went through last week that shows you the overall number of students in the Cisco Academy, which I think is pretty amazing. In Florida, we have 10,151 students, 15% are female, 116 instructors, 21% which are female. And you can see there the $36 million of in-kind contribution to Florida. Here's a list of all the schools that are in Florida that have a Cisco Academy in them. And so we support a good number of these schools in Florida and consider Florida definitely one of our strategic states, no doubt. There is a slight drop right now in the number of students, and you'll see that the majority of that has been a drop off on CCNA or RNS. So we did have, out of 57 academies, 32 of those took a loss to the roll, which made us lose about 809 students. But 5 new academies came online who had never taught in Florida before and brought with it 317 students. We've seen growth in IT Essentials, as you can see here, and a little bit of growth in Networking Essentials. And one of the things that typically happens, which is weird, but I can kind of understand it because of the way some of the courses are used in Florida, is that typically for the last 3 years, 250 new students are added in April of every year in Florida. So if we see that, then we're actually going to be at about 4,200 new students total for the year. So we may actually end up being flat or slightly up in Florida in our metrics overall. I would be interested in knowing, now I know one of the big reasons why RNS is down in Florida is just because enrollment in community college is down overall. In all schools are down in Florida. So I don't think that's to be majorly unexpected, but I do think when that 250 new students are added in April, if that holds true, we'll be back above. We'll be in the black instead of the red. I do want to give a kudo out to Ferguson High School, added 69 students to their program, going from 28 last year to 97. So congratulations to John A. Ferguson Senior High School. Any questions about Florida? Anybody from Florida want to comment on the drop in RNS? Or actually, anybody from Florida want to comment on those 250 students that typically show up in April, a new addition? I'd be interested in what that is and kind of how they come about, because that's an interesting little tidbit that every year it happens pretty much in April. Feel free to come off mute if you do have them. I see there's maybe something in chat here.
Hey, Kelly, this is Bill.
Hey, Bill.
Hey, I don't know anything about the students in April, but I will tell you that in our program, our Cisco track was a specialization within our networking AS degree.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just put through some changes where it's going to be, we're getting rid of the specializations because I had like low enrollment in all the specializations. So just to make it more efficient,
Right.
It'll now be part of our entire degree for everybody. So hopefully that'll kick us up a little bit.
Oh, that's cool. Tony makes a really good question. Tony, I have no idea why DevNet is at 1. I guess one student took DevNet in all of Florida. I find that extremely hard to believe. But I will tell you this, Florida is one of the states that putting a new class into any curriculum is very hard to do. Bill can tell you about that. You guys got to go through an entire, it's a long process. So it may be that DevNet has simply not been able to be added to any curriculums inside of Florida yet. But I agree with you. It's very suspect that just one person in Florida took DevNet. I mean, I don't know. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me either. So good catch on that. That's kind of funny. All right. Any other questions on Florida? All right, let's take a peek at Ohio. So 4,000 students, 448, 66, 13% female, 113 instructors, 17 are female, 70% are female. Here's all the different schools that are part of the Academy program in Ohio. So I won't spend a lot of time on that because they're up 1.6%. Again, seeing a little drop in RNS. And again, I think that's pretty much, we're going to see a drop in RNS because of the fact that we've had, we went from 4 classes to 3. There's been a lot of enrollment drop, but you can see here that 39 of 91 academies took a loss to their roles. We had 14 new academies though in Ohio for again 172 students. You can see IT Essentials has grown a little bit, Linux a little bit, and Python has grown, and Networking Essentials has grown a good amount. So a big kudo out to Columbus State Community College, going from 68 students to 105. So wanted to mention that. So Intel is bringing a smart manufacturing plant to Ohio. They're going to build 2 chip factories in Ohio, beginning construction 2022, online by 2025, which obviously we need more chip development here in the US and more chip manufacturing in the US, most definitely. So that hopefully will bring in some large investments into the schools in Ohio. And we mentioned this last week. We mentioned the Girls in ICT Day. So if you have not, please register. It is on April 28th is when the broadcasts are. Right now, there's some things going on, like some games and stuff you can do. So if you get a chance, get your folks signed up for that because it's really neat. And Skills for All we've talked about. And so any questions on that little overview? Okay. Well, what I am going to do now is pull up another PowerPoint. It's going to be death by PowerPoint today, folks. We'll do everything we can to make your life PowerPoint. Folks, I am going to pause the recording for just a second. So we are back and we are going to talk about Cisco Modeling Labs. And I'm going to just leave it like this because I'm going to be jumping back and forth showing you our actual lab and those types of things. So first off, what is Cisco Modeling Labs? Well, it is once called Enviral. So obviously they changed the name because that's not great to have during the pandemic. But the key word I want you to remember is fidelity. This is not a simulation, but it's emulation. And I know everyone knows about GNS3, right? Everybody know GNS3? What is GNS3? Completely legal. John says that. I don't know about all that. Yeah. GNS3 is a product out there that is an open source product that lets you run Cisco iOS images. And it is not legal. Okay. It is in no way, shape, or form legal. I guess technically, if you do own the images, you could do it. But no, it's not really legal. And one of the things we try to teach our students to be is ethical and to follow at least most of the rules. And so if we're using GNS3 to teach our students, we're really kind of showing them poor behavior. But the key thing on Cisco Modeling Labs is it is not a simulation. We are running real iOS images that are being run as virtual machines. It comes in 4 versions: Personal Edition, Personal Plus, Enterprise, and then CML for Education, which was one that was added not too long ago. Now, the Personal Edition, which you can buy for $200, is single user only. You can have up to 20 concurrent nodes. Now, when I talk about a node, I'll show you here in a minute what a node is, but it's basically an individual router, switch, host, some device that you're running inside of CML. It only has community support, so you have no ability to contact Cisco TAC if you have an issue. But you can use it in the classroom. And quite honestly, I could see if you didn't want to invest in the full CML for Education, and I'm going to talk pricing in a little bit. If I forget to mention it, Tim, you jump on me and say, hey, tell me what this is going to cost. And I'll tell you. But there are places where I think schools, if they're using GNS3 now and they want to be legal, and you're teaching more advanced topics like CCNP, network security, advanced networking, you could ask your students to buy Personal Edition for 1 year for $200 and use it, let them use it on their own devices. Okay, so that's one way you could use this. I'm going to show you CML for Education because that's what we purchased. And I'll talk about the economics of it and how I think it works. But really, other than the limitation on concurrent nodes and the inability to add in like users and groups, the Personal Edition has all the functionality of the full edition. It's just Much simpler. Now, I will say this, it will only run on VMware Workstation. And so you can run it on Workstation, simple setup, run it, no problem whatsoever. There is a plus edition, which is slightly more, it's $349, that will let you go up to 40 concurrent simulated devices, but it cannot expand past that. Other than that, it's exactly the same as before. So no big difference between the Personal and Personal Plus, other than the number of nodes and the cost. You'll see it goes up to this. By the way, this is one thing I've been trying to do for years. If you've got a company in your area that gets Cisco learning credits, see if there's any way they can give them to you. Because if there's any way we could transfer learning credits, that would be amazing, because you can actually use those to go to Cisco Live. Still working on that project, folks, and I'll probably be retired before the project comes to fruition. But my goal is to have a clearinghouse where companies can give to instructors their learning credits. Bill, yes, costs are annual for the Personal Edition. It's a 1-year subscription. Yes. Okay. Now, I'll tell you this, we did buy a 2-year subscription to our CML. Yes, John, it does do switches. I'll show you here in a minute that it does switches. All right. Now, there is a negative. I'll tell you that too. None of these editions can do serial interfaces. Okay. Right now, CML does not support serial interfaces at all. So just be aware of that. Now, enterprise is when we're getting into a multi-user environment. So you can have multiple people logging in. You're going to have to dedicate a server to this, 20 to 300 concurrent simulated nodes, and it's really all based upon what your server can handle. You can create models and what-if scenarios, connect virtual and physical. You can actually, with any of these editions, create a connection out to real devices. So it's basically a bridged interface over to a real device. So you can take these environments and connect them into your real equipment in the labs. But for the most part, the Enterprise Edition is tech support, the ability to run it on an ESXi server, which makes you be able to throw a lot of resources at it. And I'll show you how many we've thrown at ours, because we threw a great number at ours. And then CML for education is the same as the Enterprise, but I like this. It's on concurrent user instead of per node. So by that, what that means is this. We bought 20 concurrent users. So just like a Netlabs license that says you can have 16 pods, so 16 people can be working in a pod at one time, we bought 20 concurrent license for our CML education, which means 20 students can be working at one time. Now, we're going to do something really interesting with this, and I'll show you in a minute. But the good news is that means that if you have 400 students, you don't have to buy a 400 license. You buy 20 concurrent license, or how many licenses you want for the number of people you want to be in your CML instance at a time. Then pretty much everything else is the same. Runs on VMware ESXi, and it's pretty much the same as just the Enterprise Edition. Now, here are the images that are supported. So there's an iOS-V and iOS-V L2. The one thing about this L2 image I will warn you about is it does support both ISL and .1Q switching. So when you're, .1Q trunking. So when you're creating a trunk, you actually do have to put in there switchport trunk encapsulation .1Q. So that's one difference between it and the other. Go ahead, Tim. Oh, okay. Michael's asking, can you integrate it? We'll get there. Give me just a second, Michael. I'm going to show you how we're going to do that. It supports iOS, NXOS, NXOS 9000, the XRV, the XE, so the Cisco 1000V. So you could even technically import in the DevNet image into Cisco Modeling Labs, which I'm planning on doing, and then bring in the Cisco CSR 1000V and do the DevNet labs that require real equipment inside of CML. All right. There's a packet generator, a WAN emulator. There's several desktop images. So I'm going to pull over here. Well, let's hold off just a minute. Okay. You also can add images that you create. So you could create a Windows XP, Windows 95, Windows 2000, whatever. You can bring in your own images and create them as QCals and import them in as nodes. So you can add those. Now, here's what I want to show you about the big honking server. So CML does require a big honking server. if you want to run a lot of nodes. So for our CML server, we are running it on a server with I'm dedicating. Now, our actual server has more than 76 CPUs. In fact, I'm going to bring over and show you our server. So right now, here's the server that's running our CML for education. It is a Dell 640. It has, it's a Dell 640. It has 96 logical processors, 8 NICs, and obviously 766 gigs of RAM. So what I did when I created the CML for education is I dedicated to this host 76 CPUs. So I left 20 CPUs for general function and for other devices that would run on this particular machine. I dedicated 600 gigs of memory, which is overkill, I can tell you, because with my testing, I don't need that much, and 250 gigs of hard drive space. So right now, that's how we've got it loaded. The big thing about that I have learned is that you really don't need that much. I had 170 nodes running. Okay, so it was an iOS V, iOS L2, and desktops running, and I had 28% CPU load and less than 10% with 170 nodes running. So it's important to note that you're going to load in your environment the CML master, I call it the master server, but it's the CML server itself. Then you're going to connect to that with some type of other machine. It could be a Windows machine, it could be whatever. We're using a very small Linux box that we're dedicating 1 CPU and 4 gigs to. Now, I originally had this only as 2 gigs, but I found that actually causes a little bit of a problem. So you are going to need a server that can run at least that. All right. And so again, our server for what we've done is a Dell 640 with 96 logical processors and all. This server is about a $24,000 to $25,000 server last time we bought one, roughly. Okay. And so we put the CML on it, and here's the workbench. Okay. So now here's the workbench machine, and here's the interface for Cisco Modeling Labs. And what you do, by the way, I'll go ahead and log out. But to log in, you basically just go to the IP address of your CML server. Okay, and in my case, it's 10.102.70.76. Hit enter, and it's going to ask me to log in, and I'm going to log in just right now as admin with my password, which I won't tell you. Oops, of course, I got to put the right password in. And you'll notice I've got 3 labs on right now. In fact, I'm running at this point. Let's see how many nodes here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 8, about 18 nodes right now. And in that, this is the network security lab that I've created. This goes along with lab 2176 and also the other labs with the ASA. So all these devices are currently running. And you can see, someone asked, do we have switches? Well, oh yeah, we have switches. So I can open the console here, and you'll see that Big T, host S3, S3. If I do a do show ver, you'll see that this is iOS L2. So it's an iOS V image. It's an L2 enterprise image. All right. So this is a switch. Now, right now, there's only on this switch, 8 or 10 interfaces. I actually added a bunch of interfaces to this switch. Okay. There's a bunch of interfaces that you only have 4 interfaces by default, but you can add interfaces if you want. So let's see here. This one, yeah, see, this one's only got 4 interfaces. If I shut it down, I can add 4 more interfaces, no problem. Okay. But here's an ASA. So the ASA is here, and here's our little servers. Now, a couple things here. Let me go back to PowerPoint. I want to talk about. First off, we are going to use a custom pod design. So that's why it's good that today, David is going to talk about, in fact, David, I'm going to make you a co-host just so you will be able to share your stuff when we get there. David's going to talk about how to create custom pods. Well, our goal is to do the following. We are actually going to, right now, I'm not doing this. Right now, I'm literally just running the server in my 70 VLAN, and I'm running the workbench my 70 VLAN. But my plan is to do the following. We are actually going to create a custom pod, and that custom pod is going to end up looking like this. So you're going to have, here's the VM, the master VM. So this is the CML VM itself, okay? And then over here are the workbenches, which are the little, so this is a workbench, 01, okay, workbench, 02, and these will be Netlab's pods, okay? So when you boot, basically this will be, say, CML pod 01. And this will be CML pod 02. Oops, messed up there, but y'all know what I'm doing. So CML pod 02. Now, this box right here has to run all the time. So this machine, this VM will be running 24/7. It will not stop running. When these machines, and then what's going to happen, it's going to have a VNIC. So it's going to have a NIC in here, a virtual NIC, that's going into a V switch inside of ESXi. So this is a V switch. When these pods boot up, they will be connected to this V switch, and they will get a DHCP address. So they'll get an IP address. That should be a H, not an A, but y'all know what I'm doing here. Okay. So DHCP, they'll get an IP address. And then they will just open up a web browser and connect to the CML server, just like I'm doing right now. So I'm just going in. This is all, when the machine booted, that's what it had, nothing. You open up the web browser, you put in the IP address of the CML server, log in, and boom, you're in the server. So this will be our custom pod. Now, my goal is hopefully to have another VNIC here that will be connected to, that can actually go all the way to the internet, and that will be for licensing. So that's my plan. That's how I'm going to try to set it up. And then that way, all this internal stuff here has no connection to the full outside world. But I may actually decide that I need outside connectivity because I want them to be able to go get YAML files and those things. So Michael, we're going to integrate it into our Netlab system because there's not a scheduling feature in CML. And because of that, I think it's much better to do this. The other thing that's useful here is when this lab is over, the pod, when it reboots, we're going to reset to a snapshot. So these will all be snapshotted. So whatever the students do here, it won't matter. We'll just, when the lab's over, they'll snapshot or revert. It'll be completely clean for the next student. What we will also do is each one of these will log in as an individual student. So pod 01 will log in as student 01. Pod 02 is student 02. Pod 3, 04, up to 20 because we've got 20 concurrent licenses. So this is our plan for our custom pod to support CML. Questions about that? It's not running right now, but we're going to get there real shortly. I want to just get it up and running, make sure everything was running first, and then we'll build our custom pod, because the custom pod part is probably the least difficult part of what we're doing.
So just a quick clarification, Kelly, when you say that the education version has 170 nodes, that's in total or per pod?
No, when I said 170 nodes, I was saying that was the most I had running on mine at one time. So I had 170 nodes running. I think the max number of nodes you can run is only dependent upon your resources.
Okay.
Unless I'm mistaken, I believe it's 300 nodes in a single lab. So for instance, let me give you a good example here. I can add a new lab and actually, let me do this. That was the wrong thing. Let me delete this one. All right, so let's see, import. Oop, I want again. Sample labs, tool, sample labs. Take a look at this lab right here. This lab has 51 nodes in it and 80 links, okay? So I can actually open this lab right now, go to the dashboard, and you'll see this lab being open. So there's 51 nodes in this lab. So how many of your students have ever worked on a network this complicated? Probably none. But I can boot this lab Okay, I can go out here and boot this lab, and that will boot a lab with 51 nodes in it. And you'll notice, look down at the bottom here, I'm still barely cracking 2%. Now it's not booted up yet, but we're not going to get past probably 9% CPU usage, if that, maybe 10 as it boots up. And then the memory will go to maybe 4 or 5%. All the same, I'm running a network security lab with all these devices. I'm running another lab that I built here that is a lab that I used in my CCNP class to show IPsec tunnels and tunneling. And then I'm also running another lab here that I developed to just show a basic 2-switch, 2-desktop setup. So it really comes down to, we hit 11%. Oh my goodness, as it's booting 51 nodes. So imagine the fact that you can build your own labs. And I don't expect people to build a 51 node lab, but if you want to, you can. And that's something we can't do. I mean, we have a lot of routers in our lab, but we couldn't build a 51 node lab. But just imagine if you could even build it with 20 nodes and have 10 or 15 nodes in each one of the OSPF instances or each of the OSPF areas. So it's got some huge abilities. All right, so let me go back over here just a second. So we're going to use a custom design pod where the master must always be running and it must always have internet access. The CML master will not receive a clean image. It will stay up and running the full time. Individual student VMs will have access and they will revert to a snapshot. Now, here's the cool thing you can do. Let's build a lab, folks. I want to just go in here real quickly and I'm going to pull up. I downloaded this lab and I've already built it, but I'm going to build it again just for poops and grins. So this is, we're going to go in here and we're going to do this. So we're going to build this lab. We're going to build this lab right here. So I'm going to go to the dashboard. I'm going to go to add. So I'm going to create a new lab. So we need a PC. So I'm going to pull a desktop out. So there's one desktop. We need a iOS L2 image because that's the switch. So there's an L2. We need another L2. And then we need another desktop. And then let's connect them together. Now, before we do this, I am going to show you this. So we click here. You'll see that as far as interfaces go, it only has 4 interfaces to begin with, but I can add 4 more to that one if I want to. You'll notice the numbering does change, and that's good because students get so used to using the same thing over and over that it's nice to change it. But now you didn't need that. But here again is all the different types of nodes we can add. All right, so we're not doing any other ones than that. Let me find my thing here. Okay, now let's connect them. So it's real easy to connect. We just click here and then drag over. So I'm click ETH 0 to 0. I'm gonna actually do it to 0, 1 for inside. Then I'm gonna connect here to 0, 0 to 0, 0. And then let's go 0, 1 to here. Now I can move these so they're a little easier to read so that you can see what we've actually got here. Now, yes, this is different than what the lab is in Netlab, but we can rewrite this lab in literally 5 minutes. It takes nothing. I started doing it and then Word died on me because I converted it from PDF, but you can rewrite this lab in almost no time whatsoever. And then now, okay, this is a lab that we just created down here that is designed for this particular lab, which is 362. So I could say lab 3.6.2. And I'm gonna put CCNA2 just so we know. Okay. Now, the cool thing is I can now go in here and I can actually go into the lab itself and I could go to simulate, but I could go download lab and save the lab as a YAML file. Okay. Once you have a lab saved as a YAML file, now this lab is blank. There's nothing in it. So there's no startup configs or nothing, but you can actually save it. Can you get DNAC image like hosted in CML? Joe, I do not think so. The question was, can you get the Cisco's DNA Center image like the one that's hosted on Cisco DevNet for CML? No, because that image, you would have to own DNAC. I wish we could, but we cannot. Now, if you bought a license, then you should be able to create one and put it in there. But DNA Center is so big that it would probably take its own server to run it alone. So unfortunately, no. Now that I've exported this as a YAML file, one of the things I can do is just click import and files to import. Okay, I just go find this file right here, double click, import it, and go to lab. Now I've imported that same lab I just built. So we can actually build labs, put problems in them. And then even cooler is we can do crazy things like this. So let's boot this. Let it start booting. You'll notice it's booting here. But you can go into individual links, and inside of here, you can change the bandwidth, latency, jitter, and loss on the links. So you can actually change them. If you want advanced things like actually adding in a packet generator, you do have the T-Rex packet generator, which I have not used much at all, but it's in here. There's a WAN emulator in here that you can emulate WANs. But again, remember, we don't have any serial interfaces. We only have Ethernet interfaces, which is not as big a deal anymore because of the fact that we don't have to worry so much about that in the real world anymore, because almost everything is now related to our Ethernet interfaces. Okay. So we just built this lab. It's up and running. Okay, so if I go in here, and by the way, on the desktop here, if you wanted to set it, one of the other things I mentioned in this particular thing is it's really good because your students can learn Cisco is password for almost everything, but your students can learn Linux while they're in here. So PCA, which is going to be 192.168.20.13, netmask 255.255.255.0. Okay, you do if config, and we see that we've got that IP address assigned. Then we go over here, can do the same on this side, and go into the switch. Oops, go into the switch itself, open a console, and you will see that we have basically just a switch interface. I mean, it is, just the lab. So, and by the way, when you build a lab, you can also change the names. You can change the node information. So if you want to name this S1, you can do that. Go here, go S2. So there are ways to change that. A lot of you are going, well, why am I doing this instead of packet tracer? I'm just going to use packet tracer. The word I mentioned is fidelity. These are real images. These are not simulations. They're real entities that are running and available. Check out now, we look in here, let's see how much of it's booted. Looks like most of it's booted. Well, there's a couple still trying to boot, not many. So this one is still booting some images. Now it looks like it's pushing my CPU a little bit here. It's up to 22%. Oh my goodness. I've got 51 nodes plus all these other nodes on here. How many nodes are normally in our lab? 4 to 6. 6 nodes typically max. 2 routers, 2 switches, and 2 PCs is the max we have in CCNA. Even in this network security lab, you've got what? 9, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8. So this is how I really thought about teaching network security, because we don't have any network security pods here anymore. We did away with those. So this is CML, and let me go back to my little thing here. We just built that lab in no time whatsoever. We could share that lab. By the way, custom design pods for troubleshooting. This is how we did the troubleshooting for the contest last year for Skills USA. I will tell you that guest hours, Joe, I think you should be able to. The question is, can you import an iOS like Palo Alto? If you can turn it into a VM and you can make it into a QCal, you should be able to bring it in. I haven't done it, but I think if you can turn it into a VM that you can convert to a QCal, it should probably run, but I haven't tried it. I see this, by the way, where it can be used is in CCNP, network security, CCNA 2 and 3. I don't think this would be great for CCNA 1. Yeah, the VM version or NGF, yeah, Michael, that may would import right in. I'd like to try it and see, because that'd be neat to be able to put in the Cisco devices and the Palo Alto devices and make a full network together. But that's where I see uses for it. Now, price. Let's talk about price. I'm gonna add a new slide here. Now, obviously, I can't give you exact prices because prices fluctuate based upon where you buy it, who you buy it from. We did buy ours from Infonet here in North Carolina, and so I'll talk a little bit about what we did. We decided to purchase 2 years of CML with 2 years of 20 concurrent license. And I'm going to tell you, it was in the 20K range. It was 20K right in there. Okay. That's for 2 years. Let's compare that to real gear. A single pod of real gear right now is running somewhere between, what is it, about 3,800 and 4,000, depending on what you buy. So we, for 2 years, now, again, we got a 20K server behind this. But for 2 years, we have the equivalent of 5 pods of equipment that we're paying for. All right, roughly. So we bought 5 physical pods. And that would be, let's see, there's 4 devices. That would be basically 20 nodes of devices because there's 4 devices in each pod. We can do, what, 300 nodes minimum? You know, or at least 300 nodes. We'll say that's the max. 300 nodes max. I just don't see the comparison. Yeah, 20K is expensive. You're right, it is. But we decided to do it for 2 years because you do get a discount if you do it longer. But think about that versus equipment, folks. And think about the ability to do things like build a lab like this. Build something like this and actually look at how the traffic runs across something this big. We can't do that in our classrooms now. So to me, I think it's going to end up being worth it. Now, I'll go and tell you straight up, this is in no way, shape, form, or fashion ever going to be supported by Cisco Networking Academy. Okay, they're not suggesting you buy a CML. We're way out on the bleeding edge of what we're doing here, but I think it has its uses for the right audiences, and I think it has its uses in the right places. So that's CML. Are there any questions on CML? Anything you want to see? Now we are with this many nodes running at about 15% CPU and 4% memory. But again, that's 51 nodes plus 8, 10, 11, you know, we're at about 70, 60, 70 nodes running right now. Does licensing allow sharing between colleges? No, not that I'm aware of. Now, the good news is with our 20 concurrent licensing, you know, if you're a student of us, as far as being in our ITC, then you can definitely use it. But using it between colleges would be sharing. I don't know that the license allows that. As far as your students literally being just at your school using our license, but we could share it through our Netlabs. I mean, we would share it that way. I want to build out some more pods and figure out better ways to use the system. Because I think there's a lot of usages that even I'm not thinking about because of what I couldn't do. What I'd like to see is I'd like to see us bring in some images of servers and things and build. Correct. Yes, Constance, that is correct. The server was an additional cost. We already had the server, but the 20K was the licensing for 2 years of CML and 20 concurrent license for 2 years. And it was just a little north of 20. So I'm not giving you the exact number, but it was in that ballpark. So By the way, before you can delete a lab, you have to wipe it, make sure there's no current configs on it, and that takes care of that. Anything you want to see on it that you didn't see? By the way, with this, one of the advantages of CML is CML for education. You do have system administration, so you have user administration. So here you can add in multiple users. So we will have a student 01, 02 down to 020, and that's how they will log in to do their labs. And then we will actually share under those groups. We can actually share, you can share labs with certain groups. So you can actually create a lab and then have that lab associated with a particular group. Step-by-step simulations like Packet Tracer. Well, one of the things I know you can do is you can go in here and under the Simulate tab, you can, let me go to the host itself. You can actually go in and you can capture like on a link. So this link right here, you can do packet captures on it and it automatically saves it as a PCAP file. But I don't think, I'm not sure what it's talking about with step-by-step simulations. Like, oh, I know what you're saying, like stop and step it through. No, you cannot. Because this is basically real gear running in a virtualized environment. But you can capture the packets. So I can actually start here. And if I was to do a ping, in fact, let's do this. I got this configured right here. So let's go on this one and ping. Let me get down to my, there it is. Admin 01. Hopefully I typed it in correctly. Nope. There it goes. All right. So, oh goodness gracious, Cisco. This is the network security lab. So I'm trying to remember everything. So this is a do show IP and brief. All right. So let's go. Well, I shouldn't have didn't do. Let's go over here and on that link, I went to the wrong place. On this link right here, let's start capturing. So, okay, so we're capturing here. You see STP going through, and we'll go and start a ping. I clicked on the wrong thing. Hold on a second, folks. I got the clickies. So let's do a show IP at brief. So this is, okay, so it's, we're gonna do a ping. We're gonna do protocol IP. We're gonna do 172.16.3.3. We're gonna repeat it for 5,000. I'm gonna head all the way out here. All right, let's go do this. And then we're gonna go back up to our image. We're gonna go to our link. And now you can see on the link here, we should start seeing, start capturing. Here's all the ICMP packets going through. And if you click on them, you actually can get the details over here. So there are ways of capturing packets, and you can actually stop it and download it as a full PCAP file, and then you could look at it. So there's ways to do some of the stuff, but okay, pod or snapshotted, but can you link something like student assigned storage that can be persistent? Yeah, you can do that. If you didn't want it to be snapshotted, Michael, you could leave it semi-persistent, or you could have your students download, save their configs and download the YAML file. So there's a way to actually, once you've configured an entire lab, you can download it with the configs automatically in there, and then save it as a YAML. So, other questions? Someone need to jump over here. Hey, Chris, I see you're here. We're running a little long. So, yep, grade the YAML file, exactly. Yep, you could do that. You can just pull the YAML file back in to CML yourself and then grade the YAML file. That is exactly right. Okay. So everyone, I've run a little long. Chris, I'm sorry. We'll give you 30 minutes. We got plenty of time. So everyone, I'm going to now turn it over to Chris Nordlinger from Chris. I'm going to make you a co-host so you can share your files. But Chris is with Splunk, and he's here to talk with us a little bit about a new endeavor from Splunk. So Chris, you need to unmute yourself on the bottom left-hand corner in Zoom.
Can you,
Yep.
great, thanks,
We can hear
Kelly.
you. Yep, we
Can
hear you.
everyone see my screen?
Yes, we can.
Great, great. Excellent. Great to be with everyone here today. Kelly, thanks for the opportunity. Wanted to give you a sense of what we're doing at Splunk. And I know that many of you may be unfamiliar with Splunk, and I want to give you some orientation to who we are, balance that, give you an understanding of who we are, what we do, without selling Splunk. So I will walk through this with you, and any questions I'll be taking at the end. And I want to make clear that what I am going to be describing is basically what we think of as an academy. It is the same thing in the Cisco vein, in the VMware, Palo Alto, etc. In fact, I worked at Cisco and was heading up the Cybersecurity Academy at Palo before I came over here to Splunk 3 months ago to start this program from scratch. So this summer, when we offer a training to instructors, it will be through Kelly, and it will be our initial training. We have a number of our institutions that we've already done calls with that are really focused on getting into that training, and we'll be running train the trainers through Stanley and then ourselves and other organizations as we basically scale up the program to what we see as hundreds and thousands of academic alliances going forward. So to give you a sense of who Splunk is, we really talk about this, as you well know, as the data age. And data, as you may know, is not just about a record, but it's really about making things happen, acting on data. And these are all, as you know, the different technologies that are providing digitization and leading the digital transformation, everything from cloud to blockchain, RPA and IoT. And these are providing data, spinning off data. So what do we do with that data? Well, at Splunk, we like to believe that, we like to say that data is now an essential service. In fact, we'd say when you look at the icons at the bottom of the screen, we're supporting the increased demand on digital systems, all those technologies that I was showing you a minute ago. And we're driving cloud and digital transformations. And then, of course, we're very active in health and supply chain and education challenges. In fact, we believe that following the data, capturing the data, and acting on the data, acting on that data will basically be the absolutely necessary and sufficient task for companies go forward. They will either act on it or they will cease to exist. The best way that I can give you a sense of how we play in the big data space and in cybersecurity, and where we are basically, Splunk is in 100 of the Fortune 100 companies. So to establish what we actually do, let me just show a customer story that gives you a sense of how this plays and how the skills which we will be providing in hit the ground running job training, so that those lead to certs, what they actually do in the big data and cybersecurity space.
Domino's has almost turned itself into a technology company that maybe just happens to, we sell pizza on the side. Right now at Domino's, Splunk is supporting our entire e-commerce environment, look at all the ecom logs, troubleshoot any issues with releases, assist with monitoring, giving feedback to the developers, giving insight to marketing. During the most busy times, downtime can be as much as $100,000 a minute. Well, basically, we're the biggest cash register in Domino's Pizza in a way, so we're making sure it still can take money. All of our data, all of our logs were in this giant mess of files, but there was no good way to parse it, no good way to get access to it. We were literally living in the Stone Ages, downloading logs, grepping through them. Once Splunk is here, we can actually look through this mountain of data and do something useful with it. Most of the data we look at is our actual middleware application logs. We look at metrics like our orders per minute, actual transactions out to the stores, and that can tell us what customers are ordering, what coupons they're using, and we can also see how successful a coupon is in real time, basically. If a coupon's not effective, maybe they can adjust it within the next day. Marketing has seen what we can do. Management has seen what we can do with this. So we almost have to kind of keep Splunk under wraps to a certain degree. People say, can you do a Splunk monitor for that? Yeah, but I kind of want to keep, that's my secret sauce. I would say Splunk definitely contributed to our most successful Super Bowl ever. Since Super Bowl is such a high volume of traffic, we can monitor our response times, monitor our database, monitor the store responses. Going forward with Splunk, we would really like to pull more data from our stores so we can really leverage Splunk to give information to our store guys, like to create more customized dashboards for their management too, for maybe some of the higher level metrics that they would be interested in. How many credit card orders went through, how many, Android versus iPhone orders went through. That allows them to make business decisions based off the data that Splunk is giving us. Yeah, I would say we have big plans for Splunk. The data's out there. With Splunk, we can slice it up any way we want.
So I hope that gives you some sense of what we do and how that plays into specific job roles that are there in terms of everything from data scientists, admins, business users. Splunk's played a role and provides skill sets for people to play in a variety of different roles as they slice up that data and take action on it. Everything from security intrusions on networks. We're the market leader in market share in security incident and response event management, and in IT operations. So we play a role providing skill sets across all of those. Data, big data, cybersecurity jobs are skyrocketing. We know the story on cybersecurity, but essentially, according to IBM, there are 2.7 million open jobs in data analysis and data-related careers 2 years ago. Monster basically estimates that big data-related skills are going to be the most in-demand role in 2022. And in 2026, we will basically find 11.5 million jobs in data science and analytics. Cybersecurity, well, 3 million jobs open globally, and we play in both markets. So we think we have 3 million to 6 million opportunity to provide skills to get those jobs. That's what we're seeking to do with free curriculum, free training that I'll describe here. Excuse me 1 second. So the piece that I want to tell you about now is really what we're doing in the...
Chris, you're not sharing yet. If you're trying to share, there's nothing shared.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
And by the way, I just did a quick search on Indeed.com in Charlotte, North Carolina for just the keyword Splunk. 303 jobs came up, and several of them had $52 an hour as one of their wages. So kind of an interesting little thing there.
Yeah, I think we've talked about it before as Splunk is less a job and more of a career, because we believe that these are higher paid jobs that are out there and we're providing an avenue into. We already provide to institutions free e-learning that we can offer up to all of you. And I can direct you to where to go to join the Splunk Pledge. All you do is have an administrator, an instructor sign up for that school, and anybody at the school can get our free e-learning so that they can follow through, learn about Splunk. It's a good avenue that we use with different institutions to give them a sense of what Splunk's product looks like, what the training looks like, and how easy the certification is. We're spending over $100 million to generate social impact through education and these other opportunities, software support over the next 10 years. Splunk careers, we basically see a significant opportunity, particularly as students are able to see a 62% rise of expected earnings as a result of having Splunk knowledge, a 60% chance here of having 60% reported response in terms of having increased earnings through a Splunk certification. So just reinforcing what Kelly was saying there, it is not a job, but a career. And we think this is a great opportunity for us to go out with our first effort to engage academic institutions. And we would love to have all of you join us this summer for the training that we will be leading through our coordination with Kelly to everyone who wants to be in that summer training. Sorry, let me go back to it. The program, in terms of what we're offering, is really an engagement with us around the most basic fundamental training that we offer, which is our Splunk certified power user. And that is the foundation for everything that we offer. We will be giving that in a train the trainer environment with Kelly. And the key piece of that is not only will we be offering that, but we will be offering that as cert prep with free cert vouchers. So we will be offering unlimited vouchers for individuals to pass certification. And of course, we'll be offering free marketing materials for you to talk to administrators, to talk to students, and provide an opportunity to understand what that curriculum looks like and what those certs lead to in terms of jobs. It will also obviously allow your institutions to be offering this. It can stand as a standalone or as a segment of an existing cybersecurity program. There will be badges and certifications, badges, so it's a stackable in a community college framework, and also the certification so your students can be prepared to go out there and get jobs. Now, when I talked a second ago about the Splunk Pledge, the e-learning that we have, that's the left-hand side here on demand. And that's really the foundational piece. It includes labs, and it leads you through in terms of an e-learning set of modules that end up preparing a student to take that. They are recorded video, but the most significant offering, and what we'll be doing this summer, is really the basic offering. And this is what we would see at academic institutions going forward with. We provide the free curriculum oriented towards the foundational Splunk course, which is Power User. And we do the instructor training Splunk themselves with Kelly's institution. And that provides free hands-on labs and a Splunk 10 gigabit license. The delivery this summer will be more in the mode of a 4 to 5 hour, could be distributed between 2 days over 2 days a week over 4 to 5 weeks. We have not fixed that yet. I would look for your input into all of that. But in terms of you being able to offer it to your students, we view it as a 24-hour train course you would offer over a semester basis. So the e-learning would be the homework. We'd create an instructor guide. Students would come into a classroom and would be able to ask questions about the content or the lab module specifically, and the instructor will have a guide that provides talking points to promote that. There's no fee to be an academic alliance. You simply sign the agreement. And again, I said that we are providing badging and free cert vouchers. And in the next year, we have about 7 certifications, but next year we will be adding our next highest demand, which are Splunk Enterprise Security that gets you up to our highest level of cybersecurity and data security, as well as our cloud admin offerings. The summer program that I've talked about with Kelly will be the model for how we'll go to market going forward with other organizations. We'll be offering the training, as I said, it's free curriculum, it's free hands-on labs, and free cert vouchers. And at that point, I would just say that we look forward to hopefully working with all of you and open it up to any questions, but also certainly here's the contact information for asking any follow-up points, but also want to make sure that we get to the questions that you asked here in the chat. So I think the most important thing is we're doing this virtually, and that we are offering this to anyone who wants to be in it for free and getting the coupon, getting the cert vouchers, and to be able to offer this to as many instructors in your institutions as you would like. Michelle, it is not in person. It will be online to answer your question in there, and would be virtual. And we're looking at either 4 hours over 4.5 hours over 4 weeks, or it could be 2 classes a week at a shorter time frame, like 2.5 hours over 4 weeks. Any other questions as we go through that? And love to get your input with regard to any of those questions. I got in a rapid 16 minutes.
Yeah.
So if you want me to slow down or expel, please go right ahead.
Well, there's a couple things. Several saying virtual would be best because that way you get anybody could be in it. I made a mention to make everyone aware that you are starting with a certified power user as the first step in the Splunk Academy, and then you will be moving on later to others. I have a question myself, and I think folks would like to know, how many total hours is the certified power user training?
Sure. So the certified power user training is that you'll be sitting through, that you would choose to sit through Kelly, is 24 hours. So 23 hours, that is actual content. And then 1 hour is basically orientation to our systems and how to access it. A critical part of offering these kinds of trainings in data analytics is having data sets. So we will allow individuals to tap into our LMS, where they will spin up data demo servers and be able to have access to our data sets to work on and be able to go forward with a full hands-on training, as well as I said, those virtual labs. Does that answer your question, Kelly?
It does. And I think it's important for folks to note that For this first round of the classes offered, everything is going to be basically hosted by Splunk. So there's nothing that you're going to have to do locally to make anything happen other than identify instructors you want to go through the training. And then I put in here, if you have instructors who are interested, have them email me, and I'll start a list of names, email addresses, and the school they're from, and we'll see how many folks want to take the training and see what we can do to get it going. Perry Sykes has a good question. He said before came over Splunk, they looked at Splunk. They were looking at a SIM tool or SIM training for their students. They stated they had no data sets to intrusions and labs to go along with it. Has that changed?
Yeah, yes, actually, the critical piece there, I think really the important piece there is they mentioned SIM, and for the others who may not know it, that's the security and information and event management tool, which Gartner rates us as the #1 market share. And we've been 8 years running that. I only say that to give you a sense of what we can do to offer students that training and skill set that they can use in the cyberspace. When they go in to take the power user, they will have access to all our data sets to be able to work on the curriculum and not need to do anything else apart from that. That answers that question.
I think so. And I think the power user, the important thing about the power user, remember, is this is giving them the basic skills to work either in security or the data world. So it's either one. So I think it's a good starting place for either area. So even if they're cybersecurity students, they need it to be able to work with Splunk and to know the basics. And I know we talked a little bit about, I think Tony mentioned that we were using, as part of the Carolina Cyber Network, some of us have access to, was it Range Force or Cyberbit Range? And they had some Splunk things in there. So the Cyberbit Range. So this would give your students the knowledge they need to be able to actually use some of those additional labs. So,
yeah, and I just want to point out again, when we follow up afterwards, we have that free e-learning available to every academic institution so that you can, by all means, take it, play with it, see what you think of the labs, get a sense of what we do, how hard it is, how easy it is, and ask us any questions. As Kelly said, we would love to move you into the training this summer, and anything we could do to make you an academic alliance. We really excited to be playing in this space, and I look forward to growing the program significantly.
Chris, 2 questions. What's the difference between the Splunk Core certified user and the Splunk Core certified power user?
So the power user really gets you into the full elements of all the cyber capabilities, the space level security, as well as the IT management, IT ops management. So it is really the base level to get into a job that's going to fully provide you everything from a data admin, cloud admin, data analyst to business user. The core user really just gives you some sense of what the Splunk product is, but it's the power user that really moves you forward into a fully trained individual a professional.
So I'd say, Sergio, the difference would be someone who can use Word to make a document versus someone who can take Word and really make Word do what they want it to do. So that would be that. Perry has a question. How many modules or labs are in the training? Do you know that for the certified power user?
Yeah, so the basic way that I said that we're going to offer this will be the intensive using our curriculum this summer. And that has, and then when you go out and give the students the e-learning modules to do as basic homework and come into the class. There are, I believe it is 12 e-learning components, 12 e-learning modules, and 8 of those have labs attached to them, and they have assessments in those labs.
And since this is only, I say only 24 hours, but since it is only 24 hours, this could be added easily. You know, add it to another class you have. Yeah, add it on to another class that, you know, if you're running a class that's already dealing with sim tools or dealing with that, and it'd be perfect to add it as a component of that class. Or you could also, as Chris has mentioned, if your students are about to graduate, you could run a single class of 24 hours for them as, say, a Con Ed type class, and give it to them as an additional thing so they can use it to get their skills they need right when they're graduating to do that. So capstone, Tony, excellent. Yeah, I would put it in the capstone project. I know that would be a huge one. It'd be a real good thing for Nancy to put in there with that capstone project she already does, Nancy and Michael. So, and emerging technologies, you're right. Yeah, that would be a really good emerging technologies, Kendra, because it's dealing with both, not just security, but also with big data. So it's in both areas, which I think is good. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's we're willing to work in a variety of ways to really get the training out there. And back to what Kelly was saying a minute ago, under that basic offering, if you see what we're providing there, we're working with a number of R1 institutions who have very sophisticated cybersecurity offerings, and even some major centers. And we're providing modules that fit into just what Kelly was talking about as augmentations for data analytics and cybersecurity. So it can be, you know, it can be a component that's fixed in to a cyber course, or it can be a standalone. It can be offered as a workshop of those 12 modules and done in 24 hours. And it can be offered as a semester-long offering, but only 24 hours that needed to be covered with the 1 or 2 hour course for the instructor being a period in which they can simply answer questions and covering talking points.
A couple other things David mentions, it might not be bad for business admin folks for business analytics. And then Bill asked, is this a one-time or ongoing opportunity? I know, Bill, the hope would be down the road, once we get instructors trained, that we will offer it through our ITC as a normal offering, kind of like what we do now with our Cisco classes. And so that would be my deal. We'll probably, I'm sure, as Chris, as we're getting things up and going, we may offer this a couple times, you know, maybe in the summer and in the fall through with Splunk instructors. And then as it gets going and gets to be maybe bigger than what just their instructors can handle, we would look at maybe trying to start teaching through using one of our instructors from there. The other question we have, what kind of math background would students need? Looks like some statistical analysis ability. I would say, you know, logic, you know, if they can do basic logic, Boolean logic, and those types of logic, then I think it would be okay. I don't think the math is extremely difficult, especially on the power user. You know, even above that, you're not designing math algorithms. You're taking the data set and pulling the data set apart. So I don't think math will be any more than what we already have with our current offerings. So
that's right, Kelly. It basically does not require a sophisticated level of math to be able to do this and to get the certification.
Definitely. Okay. Well, folks, any other questions? We've got a couple more minutes here before we're going to transition over and let David talk about Netlabs. Chris, I really thank you very much for being here, folks. And it's one of the things I mentioned that we'd have an exciting announcement from Splunk today. So this is the announcement of the beginning of the Splunk Academy, and we're hoping that everyone who wants to participate will get in touch with us. If you have questions about the Academy directly, or like how to join the Academy, send those to Chris, because Chris has the documents and things he can send you to get signed and join the academy. If you're interested in the training opportunity, Chris, I'll start that list of folks, so you can just send me an email with your name and that, and we'll go from there. So name,
That
email
sounds
address, and
great.
who you want to be in there.
Yeah, thanks so much, everyone. Really appreciate you making the time for us. We look forward to engaging any way we can with you, and look forward to the summer's training. Thanks, Kelly. Take
Thank you
care.
very much, Chris. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right, everyone, I'm going to share my screen just a second, because I want to show you one quick thing before we transition over to David. This was that quick search I did. I think maybe I want to get this training. Look at that right there, 150 to 190 a year, urgent hiring. Of course, I don't have 5 years of experience, but still, here's 90 a year, remote in Charlotte, 52 an hour. So, and that was just a quick, just Splunk, and it was 303 jobs in the Charlotte, North Carolina area. So that was pretty impressive. Okay. Now, everyone, our next, big jobs in Tech area and around Bragg. Yeah, definitely. Most definitely. Next presentation will be David Oliver. David is a instructor at Johnston Community College and has been in the academy forever in the day. He runs a fairly big Netlabs implementation down there. And he is going to go over how to create custom pods in Netlabs. David, you want to share your screen with your slides, or do you need me to share, or what do you want? How do you want to do that?
Actually, I'll let you share if you don't mind.
Well, let me go get them. Yep.
I don't want to scare anybody or break anybody's cameras.
I understand completely. You just have to go ding when you want me to.
Next slide.
Yeah. So let me go ahead and go.
Uncle Sam has trained me very well in that respect.
I got you. Yeah. The modern military runs on PowerPoint.
Oh, dear God. If it doesn't, that and Linux, believe it or not.
Yeah.
So, folks, what I'm going to do is I've taken several classes with Jason Zeller in the summer, and some of you have also taken those same classes. And I use Netlabs solely within the classroom, but also, thank you, COVID, being able to project it outside of the classroom. We have persistent pods, our NOS 220, NOS 230, our NOS 230, 231, my NOS 110 class. We can do anything in the classroom, take it home with them. Plus, we even let the students using the VMware Academy, we let the students actually build some of their own virtual machines, especially something like Gamers Linux, and then find ways of projecting it out. So if you want to go ahead and slink to the next slide there, Kelly, I appreciate it. So one of the things before you get started, try to, and this is Jason's big selling point as well. Don't just try to run out in the middle of the road. Look before you leap. See if there's something that someone else has already created. It takes a little bit of time to create these virtual machines and to troubleshoot. I will spend, a few hours at home on a weekend and I do a lot of stuff. The summertime, I'll be making pods and just playing around with the virtual machines on my home system. And then I'll take and push them up to Netlabs, and then I'll abuse them. I will find my best guinea pig, I call it my virus magnet. I have a couple of students that could destroy an anvil with a banana, and I will put them in that pod and say, okay, let's run around, let's find stuff that's wrong with it. Let them experiment with it. They want to do it anyway. I also take and I'm enjoying, to a point, having to rewrite some of the labs, because if you know about Cisco, they love to change around the topologies between the CCNP MDP pods, or CCNP pods, excuse me, and the MDP pods. And I still have a bunch of map pods. So I have lots of equipment hanging around the classroom that is deliverable, but you know that the labs won't exactly work in one system or another. You can't transition them. So you can transition some equipment, but the effectiveness of what the students are learning, you may have to rewrite. Also, we're under I wouldn't say it's a mandate, but we're under a policy change here at JCC that everything we put up into our LMS has to be ADA compliant. So there's a lot of alt text. So if you've ever seen a lab from VMware. It's what, 40 pictures, and each one's going to have descriptive alt text. And you have to be careful with some of those copyrighted documents because you may or may not have permission to change them. We have been really lucky on that. And don't be afraid of, I call it the circular device reconstruction. Don't reinvent the wheel. If someone else has already made a virtual machine and it works, use it. Just make sure it's licensed in such a way that you can use it. For example, the Microsoft Academy, the MSDNA, Cisco going all the way across. Believe me, this has been our biggest headache, has been making sure everything is legal, going through each and every articulation agreement, and then getting the lawyers to duke it out. And, then the lawyer's office gets COVID. The other part that you have to think about is that if you're making a lab and you're customizing a lab, what are you trying to get across and what level? For example, Kelly was talking about the CCNP. I'm actually experimenting with my students in teaching the NRC side of the house this semester. And they went from CCNA 3, jumping into some of the CCNP that they did over the summer in a self-taught class a little bit, to jumping straight into the NRC. And we're using map pods. I only have 2 MD Cisco CCNP pods. I'm going to hurt myself on that today. And I'm having to rewrite them. And then you got to look at, okay, what iOSs do I have on the switches? Can they support this? Can they handle this? Is there a nuance in here I'm missing? And that's been a time constraint. That's been a time consumer. And when you're working with first year students in 100 level classes, especially something like NOS 110, I've got students who can't spell IT. I hate to say that, but there's no prerequisite for them to be able to have an English level of 111 before they walk in. So that's a course where we've got to do a lot of hand holding and making it simple. The virtualization course, CTI 140, is the same way. And while I was waiting to get access into Brightspace, which I do appreciate all the help that I've got from Stanley on that, and Susan Cofield, it took time for the lawyers to duke the statements out. So I actually had to create labs on my own that the students could use. And that took a lot of time. And I'm still troubleshooting some of those. Go ahead, next slide, please. Now, one of the big things is, again, making sure you got your licenses legal. Look at creating a template first. Someone's already got a template. Make sure you apply your licenses while you have the virtual machines in a place where you can apply them before you put them up to Netlabs. Or when you've got them in the Netlabs, you're going to have to connect to the internet, especially from Microsoft, to make sure that you have an activated copy. Don't be afraid to use Pixabay or someone else from Creative Commons authorization so that you don't have to worry about your images that you're using. If you want it, Jason Zeller has already sent out previously a template from NDG that you are welcome to use. That way it keeps everything that's in Netlabs, succinct across the board. So if anybody wants that, I've got that zipped up. I can, if you want to email me or email Kelly, I'll be more than happy to give it to you. But it keeps things common in Word. It's easy to make sure that your Word documents are ADA compliant. Then once you're through with that, take it and make it into a PDF, because you'll need the PDF to push up the Netlabs. One of the things I had the biggest problem with was logins and passwords, trying to keep sysadmin and training as your password all the way throughout, because it's a little bit easier for the students, kind of like Cisco does Cisco in class whenever it comes to standard passwords. Now, if you're doing an advanced class, for example, NOS 230 or 231, and you want to show progression, don't be afraid to use persistent pods. Everybody else hates them. I have not had any problem with them. We're running about 30 persistent pods made up of anywhere between 2 VMs to 5 VMs, all connected together, running Windows servers. And it works great. And it puts the responsibility back on the student. Well, you broke it, you fix it. You're in an advanced class. And that is, to me, is also, some people can call it tough love, but I'm like, if you break the car, you got to fix it in order to make it home. So
David, I have a quick question on that.
Sure.
Do you, on those persistent pods, do you use pod ACLs and limit the only one student to that pod?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. That's one thing you would need to do if you don't want someone else messing with the other person's pod. I
Right.
will warn, the other thing with persistent is be careful about your space usage.
Yes.
Don't use thick VMs. Try to use thin VMs everywhere you can. Otherwise, you will run out of space on your hard drive setup.
Yes, and that is very true. And one of the things to be careful about too, thank you for Kelly reminding me about the ACLs, is that whoever is your instructor for the class, if you have an alternate instructor, make sure that that instructor is included on the ACL. Give them their separate ACL. The student has an ACL and they just have access to their pod. So they can't, like you said, mess somebody else's stuff up. The persistent pods, also consider the fact that you need to flush them every so often. Make sure that you keep them there long enough to do your practicals, and we do our practicals on a persistent pod as well, but it's a lot smaller. Anything that's a 200 level class, the students, except for Net 289, every class that's in 200 level and our Cisco classes have a practical exam mixed in. So the students know that you're actually doing practice before you do your practical. So next slide, please. Now, when it comes to the write-up, there is an auto grade function if you use the LMS integration tool, or LTI, that you can set, but it is based upon how long the student making a reservation, the student entering the reservation, and staying in the reservation a certain length of time. A lot of things that I will do, we're using Blackboard for now. We're about to switch over to Canvas sometime soon. They push the delay back a little bit, not 100% sure when that's going to happen. I like to make sure the students have a deliverable. That way they get used to that in the business world. So I always require them to do a screen capture internal to Netlabs and external to our LMS so that I can see what they did. Also, remember that you can view Cisco equipment logs, but when it comes to your virtual PCs, if they are reverting, back to a snapshot, you lose those logs and capability to go back and look at them. Whereas if it's a persistent machine, you can look and see what they did, what they broke, and help them if need be. The internal screen captures, remember that your instructor is going to have to go in and check those. If you do it externally, then it's in your LMS. Makes it easier to work with. And I have not found an LMS yet. I've worked helping people with Canvas and Blackboard and 2 others. I have not messed with Moodle in a while, but the my wife is giving me the evil eye there. She works for another community college that they use Moodle, and
Of the devil.
it is not a fun thing to integrate that LMI tool into. Also, don't be afraid to add some questions inside of it, inside of the lab. Give them a lab document that they have to turn in. The one thing is, it's a big headache when it comes to the PDFs into Netlabs. If you have a fillable PDF, a lot of those do not integrate well when you come out. So what I have done on my side is put the Word document inside of the LMS, PDF is inside of Netlabs. Everybody's great and happy. Okay. And how are you going to grade them? How are you going to get the feedback to them? So next slide, please. And by the way, everybody understands that RD does not equal FC. I thought Kelly would have a little bit of fun with that. Rough draft does not equal final copy. You're going to edit, and re-edit. And once you've developed the labs of topologies and the VMs, then you can start thinking about, okay, I need somebody else to look at this. I need a fresh set of eyes, just like proofreading. You always want a fresh set of eyes to find the bugs. And then fix your pods get your lab documentation, go ahead and get those lab documents together in Word form and in PDF form. And then you can assault the server, but don't be afraid to experiment. Okay, don't be afraid to mess up. And I have found that there are some little differences between the VMs, how they work, and say VMware Workstation Professional versus how they're going to work when you get into Netlabs. Not a whole lot, but just a few things. Okay, especially when it comes to your images. You know, your images on your local machine doesn't hurt you a bit, but if you do something in Netlabs, you want to keep it below 600 by 600 pixels, especially when it comes to the topology sheets. So next slide, please. Okay, so jumping into Lab Designer, the administrator of your Netlab service has to give you that permission. It does not come, it just goes your instructor. You have to get it separately. Okay, once you've got it as a privilege, or if you are the administrator, which I know a lot of you are, you already feel the pain of having to look after all of this. I gave you the quick picture up here. So in case you're forgetting, notice it's not Pod Designer or the course manager. You got to start with Lab Designer first. Next slide, please. Now, one of the big things, make sure that when you create a new build, when you're getting into this process, make sure that you put your initials to it. That way it can be tracked. The system will create a global ID for you. You don't have to worry about that. Every single document associated with that will be coded under that NLIX or NLX file associated with it. So for example, in here, I just made some for CTI 140, which is Introduction to Virtualization. I made some custom labs using TrueNAS, Proxmox, Windows 10 with Fedora. I put in there, make it simple. It's simple, fill in the blanks when you start off. The global ID, like I said, that's the one in the blue at the top. That is unique anywhere. That way, if it comes off of that system, and let's say Kelly's like, I need something for my school, if I can technically give him the export the documents and such and send to him, he can use them. He can actually use the entire pod set and install this in one big chunk. It's a lot easier for him. You got to be careful with your institution because each institution has its own different rules and such when you create a document that's on something that they provide. For example, at my school, they get 50% of whatever the royalties are and the copyrights. So next slide, please. Okay, so when you create your Word documents, remember that whenever you get your finalized version, save them as PDFs. Now, these are very large because I didn't shrink down my images, but this was an experimental class where I just made a few labs. Name them so it's easy to put them in order. Okay. I actually used names that were too long in this portion of the presentation just to show the headache that you get when you're working with that. And when it comes to references, that's how many times it's used. For example, if you do a review lab and you want to bring it back, that reference code number is going to change to 2 or 3 every how many times you use it. Okay. Excuse me. Okay, next slide. Now, here is why I break off of the norm. You can use JPEGs or you can use PNGs. Jason has recanted. He said at first use JPEGs. Now he's saying use PNGs to make things easier. Here, that particular image at the top is used in 5 different lab topologies, or it's the topology that's used 5 different labs. That's the reason it's 5 and the bottom one's 2. So that's something that you can go back and check yourself. Notice the global ID hasn't changed on any of this. Okay, and yes, the build number is going up because I had to revise it several times. Every time that you revise your build number goes up. Okay, next slide, thank you. Now, your index is going to be the order in which it is shown. Now, I switched here, created a lab, which was for Net 270, which was a custom lab using a map pod. So that my students could actually go through and use the map pods to do an NRC lab. So that's the reason why it says Net 270 customized.
Let me stop here a second and mention
Sure.
this, because this is a very important part. If we go back one, what was happening is David was creating a custom pod for that CTI 140. So it's going to be just virtual machines. This, however, is David has decided he's got the map pod, so 3 routers, 3 switches. He's built a lab using those pieces of equipment. And so you're not building a new pod, you're just building a new lab using those 3 routers, 3 switches. So you can actually set it up to where if you know that you want to build a custom lab using our pod designs that we have today with the 2 routers, 2 switches for CCNA 7, you can do that. So you don't have to completely reinvent the pod type to create a custom lab. So that's a very important thing to show here.
Yeah, and it gets you some more life out of this equipment. Also, you have students that in the job field, they're going to get exposed to a whole lot of different items. Some of it's newer, some of it's older. Remember that I'm working in Johnston County, so we got a lot of folks that are working for the pharmaceutical companies that are in Clayton and here in Smithfield, and then they're going up to Wake County, working in Raleigh and parts in RTP. So the plethora of equipment, my 50-cent word for the day, that they're going to run into can be anything from, I've got a company that's just down the street that's still using 2800s. We're trying our best to convince them to come into the 21st century. Another company that is already using Nexus switches, and they have ripped their data center apart. They hired 5 of our students to go in, and they put in leaf and spine, and now they're doing everything in their SDN. I mean, they're pumping it into it. And we want our students to get the best bang for the buck. We want them to get the most exposure that we can, because we don't know what they're going to run into. And I have more map pods, because map pods can be transitioned into MDP pods, whereas the CCNP pods cannot do anything else besides CCNP, unless you want to rewrite MDP labs. So next slide, please. And one thing I forgot to mention, when you're doing a lab set, you can change around the type of pod. So for example, in my CTI 140 class, the first several labs use 5 virtual machines. Then the rest of them just use 2 virtual machines. You can change that in the set of screens. So this is a side-by-side. This is actually, if you go into the system, this is top and bottom. So at the top, this is my 16th lab. Got the name up there at the front. Name it how you will. Make sure that PDF shows, and then make sure your image matches. So if you're going to, the pod has to match the image of what you're using. Now, on the right-hand side, this particular pod only needs 3 routers, 2 switches, and nothing else. If you don't need it, turn it off. And for those of you who've ever done the CCNP or the CCNP EN core or NRC course, you know that they love to change the names of certain switches to DL or D1, D2, as opposed to S1, S2, S3, like you've got in the MDP and map pods. You can put that alternate name in that second column, and if you're not going to use it, put it unused. One of the other things is that I'm working with our cybersecurity instructor. He's wanting to make custom labs for CCT 110, I believe, over the summer, and to put a router and hide it out there. You can do that with this. Okay, and that's what the packet tracer pod involves. There's a hidden virtual machine there that's acting as a router and firewall. So you can play around with this. And again, this is using what's already there. Notice it says use pod default. I'm not playing around with the VLANs. Let the VLANs as they are. If you are using the virtual PCs and just virtual machines, it will list based upon the pod that you choose. Those will be listed there as a device, and you can choose to use them, to hide them, or unuse them, alternate names, etc. Okay. In fact, on the virtual PC or the virtual machine pods, you might have 2 clients and 2 servers. change the names of those servers to what the operating system is, like Windows Server 2019 or Ubuntu server, something like that, whatever fits your pod. Thank you, sir. Next slide. Okay, now, as you can see, I have done a lot of revisions here. The top one is highlighted, or excuse me, it's in bold. Okay, it's installed, but it's not really installed until it's committed. Notice where the pointer is. One of the best practices is to, number one, clone your pod and export a copy of it. Make sure that you back it up in your virtual machines, etc. And notice that all of these have the same global ID at the end. Okay, that is based upon what you started off with. They will not change no matter how many builds you do. Okay, so the build is almost ready. It's not installed until you click commit. Then once you click commit, you get another screen. It's kind of like Microsoft. Are you sure? So next slide, please. Now, if I had a student that was on here that was actually using the build 18, they are still using the build 18. It will not affect them. But anyone, once you click commit and install and authorize, then students will be able to see that new build, those new labs, or how you changed anything. Okay. And like I said, it triple asks you, it's like, are you sure? Are you really, really sure? It's kind of like Microsoft. You want to format the disk? Are you sure? Because once you commit, it locks it in place and you cannot change it unless you create a new build. That's one of the kickers. Next slide, please. Okay, see, we've been committed. So now you install the build. Once it's installed, and this has already been authorized by the administrator class, and that's the reason why I got 19 builds on it. Once it's authorized for a community, then it can be used. Okay. In this case, I've already installed it, or excuse me, I've already gotten it authorized. Click install build. Now that 19th version, it's committed. It can be used. The additional labs or the changes of labs can be used. Okay. And I didn't go over about the authorized set. I tried to time it out so I wouldn't go over too much time for y'all. Okay. So next slide, please. So I tried to keep it under time. Does anybody have any questions or?
I think one of the things to remember is that with this, you do have one of the things we get in trouble with is we get in trouble with forgetting to authorize things, and so you need to, making your own labs. The cool thing is you got it all here and you commit it and you got the build, but if the admin doesn't authorize it, it does not go into the list of available labs. So
correct.
But the other neat thing about this is, and I think is a key component, you don't have to build a full new pod to build a new lab. This is just making new labs. And what David's showing here is taking our existing map pod that already exists, or you could use the multi-device pod, which is the new version 7, and you can write your own lab. So if you've always wanted to do a lab on IPX, SPX access control list for some crazy reason, you can do that. Or if you wanted to do a lab on, one of the cool things I could see is maybe on your PCs, you put some hacking tools to do MAC address flooding. And so you could use one of these to actually do a MAC address flood against one of the switches and flood the MAC address table and show that as a possible lab. So you can take your existing pods and build these custom labs, which are really, really cool.
For anybody doing cybersecurity, one of the fun things is to take, since you're in a sandbox, don't be afraid to use those hacking tools, whether it's Metasploit or Kali Linux. Throw it in there with your pod as one of the virtual machines. I did that with one, and I caused a rather seismic event in the class, and one of my students made the mistake and turned off spanning tree on one of the switches. It had a rather dramatic cascading effect all the way across our Netlabs instance. Was fun to watch, not fun to experience, but fun to watch.
Definitely. Are there any other questions? If here's David's email address. So if you have any questions on these, contact David. David has built more custom labs than I'll ever do, and especially, you know, custom pods. So if you have questions, send it to David, and we really appreciate, David, you taking the time to show us these making your own custom labs and Netlabs.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, everybody. All right, we are now at 6 o'clock, and we are at the point where we are open to questions. So let me share my screen here. Just a couple of updates. Again, don't forget our summer ITC classes are June 1st, August 14th. There are 0 slots left in our 100 free CCNA 1 slots. So 100 slots have been asked for. In fact, 101 slots have been asked for because some emails passed. And so I'm actually doing 101 slots. So now who's going to sponsor CCNA 2 for me? I need 20 grand. No, actually, that's the call out there to all the companies who would like to sponsor 100 instructors being certified in CCNA 2. So right now, we've got those 100 summer slots. So we hopefully will be able to get you some slots in CCNA 2 and then CCNA 3 down the road. Folks, are there any questions about anything we went over today? The CML, Ohio and Florida stats CML, the Splunk Academy, or custom Netlabs labs. If you have questions about the Splunk Academy and joining the Splunk Academy, please send those to Chris Nordlinger. The email address was in our chat and also in the slides earlier. If you would like to be involved in or have instructors that you would like to be involved in the training this summer, send me an email and I will put them on a list that I will start for possible training this summer. Okay, I'm gonna stop my sharing. Any other questions, everyone, or anyone? Well, thank you all for being here. Oh, go ahead. Yeah.
Kelly, one thing we have at Johnson Community College, we actually have a full-time IT instructor position that is wide open. If anybody would like to join us crazy folk over here, you'd be greatly appreciated.
All right. So everybody, and again, anybody who has an open position during these meetings, post it in the chat, and you can do that again next week. Our meeting next week, we do have one, and we're going to be going over some of the other academies that we support. In fact, let me see if I can find next week's. Well, of course, the one day I don't have my thing right here. Give me 1 second, I'll find it. Our agendas sometimes get in flux, but next week is Susan with the VMware Academy, Marianne Bryans with the Palo Alto Academy, and then we've got both cyber.org. Chuck Gardner and Georgette Price will be here to talk with us a little bit about cyber.org group and program. And then Laura Parrish and Jeff Dubé will be with us from the Red Hat Academy. So we basically have all of our other academies giving updates next week. Wake Tech also has a full-time cyber position. So that's at least 2 positions I know of. We have a full-time CIO, Chief Information Officer position. Jeff Drake is retiring. It's funny, I was talking with my nephew, and I believe I may, if I'm not the most senior faculty member on campus, I'm real close, which is kind of scary, that I may have the most number of years of anybody. So, yeah, are we authorized to retire yet? Dave, you already retired once. You can't retire again. Okay, everyone, I'm going to stop the recording.